So next speaker is Brendan Dell. Please, Brendan, join me on the stage here. So Brendan helps founders identify their unique sales story. He's also the teacher of the positioning course at CXL, and I'm following him on LinkedIn. I really dig his thoughts, and so he is going to tell us what are the 8 elements of a high growth narrative strategy. All right, Brendan, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks, Pep. I'm listening to the tail end of Marcus's talk there. Hopefully I've got some new perspectives to bring into this. What's up, everybody? Where are you guys all coming in from? Looks like we got 87 people here. Where are you guys all tuning in from? Nice. Well, we got people from all over the place. Cool. What's up, Marcus? All right, so today we're going to talk about the 8 elements of a high growth narrative strategy. And I've got one goal for this presentation here. And that's to give you a framework to stand out as one apart rather than another one of those. Wow, we really do have people from everywhere. It never ceases to amaze me how, think about 30 years ago, I've seen Estonia, New York, Houston, Fort Worth, Mumbai. That's crazy. This never could have happened 30 years ago. We're chatting with people from all over the world. I think that's just unbelievable. All right. So the goal, give you a framework to stand out as one apart rather than another one of those. Quick introduction to who I am. My name is Brendan Dell. I'm the founder of B2H, which is a consultancy where we help technology companies become more unignorable. What that looks like is messaging strategy, go-to-market strategy, and I act as a fractional CRO for early stage companies. I also wrote a book called The 12 Immutable Laws of High Impact Messaging that sort of distills down how I think about messaging and how to stand out. And the overarching hypothesis that I want to present to everyone here, and based on the comments I was seeing from Marcus's presentation, I don't think I'm going to need to do a lot of convincing here, is that we've entered the era of narrative marketing. And what I mean by that is the following. So this is David Cancel, and for everyone on this call, they probably know who this is. He's the CEO and founder of a company called Drift, and years ago, he made this tweet that said, product-based differentiation is going away. Act accordingly. And this is how I think about that statement. This is a traditional positioning statement, right? This is something we all know. Can you guys not see it? Thank you for somebody for finally saying that. Let me try to reshare. Sitting here clicking through stuff. All right, let me reshare it. Can you see it now? Thank you, Grace. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I could have sat there and talked this whole time. Cool. All right. So this is a traditional positioning statement for target customer description, right? Our product's a product category that provides compelling reason to buy. Unlike the product alternative, we've assembled key features. And what positioning is, right? What this statement is meant to do is to be an internal tool for teams to align around a point of differentiation, focus of what we're doing here at the Winter Games, right? Nice, Fab. Yeah, we planned this. We planned me to screw up the presentation. Love it. So here's my problem with approaching things this way. Okay, what this does as an organization is it turns us internal, right? It says we've assembled the following key features. We're different because what my hypothesis is, what I believe and what I've seen to be effective is that the way to go to market is not to think about we've assembled key features, but to think about how do you tell a story that presents change and benefit for someone else. And by keeping both internally your team and externally your message focused on this story, what it does is create a customer-centric organization that's constantly messaging to help its end user market and own share in the mind versus a company that's constantly focused on how its unique widgets are different than everyone else. Okay. And this is something I already saw you guys talking about. And I love, love, love that this continues to get shared so much because I think this is such an important point. So this is the marketing technology landscape from 2011, right? And I saw you guys looking at the MarTech graphic and the 2020 MarTech graphic in the comments before. And why this is so important is that across technology categories, right? When you look at this, this is only 9 years ago. We can read all the logos on this page and we can see a discrete set of solutions, which within any subcategory here, right? Let's take mobile marketing. You could try to take a set of features and stand out, right? To create a position in the mind where you're different based on a core set of features. This is the world we live in now. So since 2011, that's a 5,233% increase, right? Remarkable, unprecedented increase. And this is across technology categories. It just so happens this is the most concise visual representation that we have of this kind of consolidation. There's a variety of reasons that when you work in technology, we're seeing this kind of growth. One is access to capital, right? Venture capital is all over the place. Second is Amazon Web Services, making cloud applications more easy to develop, and so on. But what this does is create, God, are we still having tech problems? Back, forward. You see that? I'll keep talking and hope that, all right, cool guys. Working, cool. So here's what this does, right? Since we've seen this kind of competition grow, right? What we're seeing is consolidation and attrition. So 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have disappeared over the last 50 years due to digital disruption. What that means is they're not keeping pace in their go-to-market in this kind of competition. We know that 75% of venture-backed companies fail, and we're seeing that professional tenures, especially on the growth side of organizations, are at historic lows, right? And yet, despite this, right, despite our categories growing like this and us being unable to differentiate from, I mean, you look at some of these categories, it's just unbelievable. And I think it's something that people don't pay enough attention to because there's just so much noise. Every single one of these people is going after the same buyers. Even if it's not the same solution, there's only so much cognitive space we have to retain information and for people to gain share of our mind. And so despite all this competition and it having these effects on companies, we see a few thrive. And I heard Marcus talk about a few of these folks as well. And I think it's wonderful because in all these categories, a few rise to the top, right? So why is this? What's the commonality between these folks? And I'll pause here for a second because I think it's so important. Winners own space in the mind, okay? And this, so I come from the B2B space, right? I primarily work with B2B organizations, SaaS companies, HP, Expedia, even are some examples of those folks. What most companies do when they go to market is they focus on direct response. If you go to any growth stage company, what you're going to do is see founders. And so let's look at the chart on the right side there. Mental availability drives growth in B2B. Most of these folks, most organizations go to market with direct response, which is activation. This is a British study. But what it turns out is that the companies that thrive and that actually see business results on the back of their marketing, that 25% of the venture-backed groups that stay in business, are the ones that focus on being known. Gong, Drift, Zora, right? These people are synonymous in our mind with a specific promise. And it's because they go to market in a bigger way. They're not focused on these transactional one click equals one conversion. What they're doing is building fame, notoriety around a story, okay? The most effective way to own space in the mind is with narrative. And this is a stat we've likely all on this presentation seen before, right? That stories drive mental availability. Facts or information is 22 times more memorable in a narrative presentation than in facts alone. And this translates into business outcomes. Okay. This is an example from DocSend. When they took their sales deck without a story and allowed people to go through it, and then with a story and drove people through it, you saw 3x increase in the number of people who actually sat and listened to the presentation. Think about for your business, if you had 3 times as many people sitting, captivated, listening to how you can help them. Think about the impact that that would have. Okay, this is what narrative does. So let's talk about what this looks like. Now, the structure that we're going to talk about here, I'm sure there's going to be overlap with what Marcus discussed. And the reason is that a good story, the elements of a good story, this is baked into humanity. It's something we've been doing since the Bible, right? We see the same kinds of elements. But what I'm going to position here is that by using this framework and tweaking it to your organization, okay, you can create a story that's going to position as one apart, where people are searching for who you are rather than what you do, right? You don't want them searching for chat software. You want them to go drift. And so these are the elements. And what we'll do with the remainder of this presentation, we'll talk about these elements. I have time to deep dive them all. We'll talk about the 3 most important things for a compelling story, and we'll share a couple examples. 8 elements here. Okay, first is best customer. Okay, there's a lot of definitions of best customer, and we could do a whole presentation on that, but it's essentially the people who buy the fastest, spend the most, and return the most often, right? It's the people who get the most value. The next is demand type, right? The demand type is something that was defined by Serious Decisions. We'll go into this more in a second. It's extremely important. This is something that most people don't do when they design a narrative. They forget this piece. There are 3 kinds of demand: new concept, new paradigm, and established category. We'll talk about them in a moment. But the kind of demand you're trying to create affects the story you need to tell. The change in stakes, I heard Marcus talking about this, and he's exactly right. It's critical that we define, especially with new concept solutions, a change that's already happened in the world and give us some imperative to change. So part of the title of this presentation, High Growth Narratives, part of being high growth is having a reason that people have to do something right now versus that sounding like a nice thing to do and having them wait. Creating that imperative is around showing them that if they don't take action, there's going to be consequences, right? And you can't do that without some sort of change in the world, without some sort of stakes. You can even look at something like The Hobbit as an example of this, right? If is it Frodo? I think it's Frodo. If evil was perhaps coming, right? And maybe this ring, Bilbo, thank you. Bilbo. Yeah, if evil was maybe coming, right? And this ring was maybe going to help, then, well, we'll see. But the evil had already swept across the world, right? And he had this ring and it was going to save everybody. So you need a change that's already happened. And that's what makes the imperative. You have a villain. This is a personification of the problem. This is the thing standing in the way of change. And personifying a villain is what gives your audience, the people who believe you, something to rally against, okay? Extremely important. The promised land is the end state for customers. It's the result you're going to create. And the key part of this, and we'll deep dive this in a second, is that the promised land you develop is difficult to reach without you. You have a simple promise, which is what people will remember. The superpowers is actually your features. This is where you get down in your points of differentiation. And what you'll see is it's actually the least important part for the narrative on a market level, on a demand level, brand level, right? Because people are going to replicate those features and benefits, but they can't replicate your story. And then the proof is showing that you can deliver on the results. I'm going to speed up here for time. So the goal of all this is simple. Like we said, what we want as organizations is people searching for who we are, not what we do. We don't want to be in competitive comparisons. We want to be the one that they're looking for. Okay, let's talk about the 3 keys here. 1, okay, these are the 3 most important things, I think, if you're going to create a narrative that you need to do to be successful. 1 is you need to be helping a specific kind of person. 2, you need to be helping them with a real relevant and risky problem. And 3, you need to deliver a clear, believable, hard to reach promised land on the back of that. So let's talk about helping a specific someone. Best customer, we're not going to deep dive that right now. There's many definitions of this, okay? But it's important that if you're going to do this, you should have some clarity over who your best customers are. But what I do want to spend a few minutes on is this idea of demand type. How many people here have heard this term demand type? Just do 1 for yes, 2 for no. Awesome. Cool, Mark. Yeah. All right. Perfect. Thank you, guys. So here's what this means. Serious Decisions define that there's 3 kinds of demand. And in technology, the kind of demand you're trying to drive affects the narrative that you create, right? First concept here is new concept. This is an entirely new kind of solution, right? This is something that is entirely disruptive. It's a new product or service. There's no budgetary line item, and it requires issue creation, right? This is brand new technology. In PS, it's very rare that this actually comes to market. The second type is new paradigm. This is where most SaaS solutions fall. And what you're doing is retooling an existing process, solving a current problem better, replacing a current line item. Salesforce is an example of this, right? They took CRM software, they brought it into the cloud. Third of this is established market. Okay, this is your red ocean categories. This is things now like a learning management system where there's lots of them and it's a highly competitive space. And the kind of demand you have affects the narrative that you need to create. So a new concept requires an extremely compelling change, right? People don't understand this. You need to create a brand new world where they're going to adopt this new technology, and it has to happen now. A new paradigm requires an extremely strong villain. And on the example here, we on the right there, we have two examples of strong villains, right? The top is Salesforce, and they said software is the enemy, right? Drift said forms are the villain. Not copying Salesforce, but inspired by, let's say. And established categories where it can get interesting. Overwhelmingly, most companies are going to fall into a new paradigm solution where they're trying to take something you're already doing and disrupt the status quo to say, do something else using our tool to reach this better way of doing things. Second key to success here, we need to help people solve a real, relevant, and risky problem, which is change in stakes and villain. I heard Marcus talking about this in detail, so I'm not going to pause on this point long. But the important piece here, and I heard him mention this, is the most effective change in stakes identify something that has already taken place. We're doing that in the presentation in the way that we talk about things, right? So my position to you all is that competition is reaching unprecedented levels. Companies are failing. People are getting fired. And if you don't start going to market in a different way, you're not going to be successful, right? I've delivered a change in the world and stakes that makes it imperative to go to market in a different kind of way. If you feel at all a twinge of, boy, I better think about the way I'm doing this. When I say that, you can see the effectiveness of this tactic, and it works across categories. It works for freelancers. It works for anyone. The villain is the second piece of this that is extremely important. They personify pain, okay? This is the thing that inhibits change. It's common to all customers and it's relevant to your demand type. So what I'm sharing here is a personification. This has made Mucinex millions and millions of dollars by personifying mucus. Disgusting, but effective. And that's what we need to do. We need to take this specific person, right? They've got a problem. Let's take Drift with marketers. They've got a problem. They need to drive leads. What's not effective anymore? Forms are not effective. People don't like them, right? The world has changed. People don't want to fill out your forms. So you need to find a new way to generate leads if you're going to find success. And then the third key here, you need to then show them that with you, that you can help them reach this new world in a believable, hard to otherwise reach way, right? If whatever promise you're making is easy to get without you, it's not going to be effective. So the promised land is self-actualization for people, okay? And there's 4 elements of a successful promised land. We're going to help them thrive in a new world. It's going to be difficult to reach without help. It's going to help them overcome this villain. And on a personal level, using our marketing example, it's going to help them self-actualize, right? I'm going to get more esteem if I can deliver more leads by moving away from this form-based approach. And what I'm going to do is speed ahead here to a quick case study from Drift. In this graphic, I think you can see the entire element of an effective narrative strategy, right? Because what are we doing? We're focused on marketers, right? And we're saying the world has changed. In the old way, you would take these people, they would fill out a form, they would go to your email, they would go to your CRM. It was a long process, it's ineffective, and customers hate it. And in this new world, right, the world that we're going to help you create, we're going to deliver conversational marketing, right? So for marketers, in a world where people no longer want to fill out forms, we can help you engage with customers, do it faster, get leads faster, which raises your esteem, right? They tell the story of change. And on the back of this, they deliver consistent proof that people like us do things like this. So that's Seth Godin, that's a quote I love. And he says, the essence of marketing is people like us do things like this. And what they show is marketers like us use tools like Drift, and they drive these kinds of results. Since we're running up on time, I'm going to skip through this presentation. This is why you should practice more. and touch on this. This is an example of a traditional positioning statement. So I believe that most folks on this call know about Zuora and their subscription-based deck, right? That has been popularized by Andy Raskin. Now, what if Zuora instead focused on traditional positioning? For companies looking to move to subscription-based models, or as a subscription service that makes the transition easy, right? What they're doing internally and externally is focused on negative social proof, right? They're saying, unlike other solutions. So there's a phenomenon in human beings that says communications fail when they stress that an unwanted behavior is commonplace. So whenever you as a company focus internally on what makes us unique rather than externally, right, what we actually want people to do, it's ineffective. And so the whole transition you can make by being a narrative organization is to innovate for customers, not against competitors, right? To be for them rather than focused on what others are doing. This is why Ben Horowitz, partner and co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, is famous for saying the company story is the company strategy, because when you do it right, it drives everything. And you get that memorability, you get that ability to stand out and to drive that mind share that creates the winners in a given market, right? That allows you to stand out in a world where there's thousands and thousands of people competing for the same kind of attention that you are, and to own that top 1% mind share where people don't think chat, they think drift, they don't think call recording, they think gong, and etc. Boom, I'll stop there. 20 minutes, 22 minutes.
Thank you so much. Let's get into some questions here. All right. One question I have here for you is from Jelly. How do you apply the demand type to non-SaaS, especially if this is B2B industry where you trade commodities?
What kind of what are we talking about here?
Well, Jelly, if you're here, can you
yeah. Well,
clarify? But let's say they're selling rocks to construction companies. They're selling bricks to construction companies.
So you're an established category, right? You are a commodity. You are by definition. So you have two choices if you're an established category. You can either change the conversation, which is to try to create a new category, or you can try to be better, faster, cheaper, right? And the narrative, when you differentiate, so first of all, in an established category, most people are not doing this. Most people do not tell stories. Most people just say, we sell rocks cheaper, right, as an example. So by simply doing something different, you're going to create that cognitive dissonance and can stand out. But the rules that you should be looking at are those for established categories, right? You need to find, you need to tell a different story than what everyone else is telling.
All right. Any further question, guys? Please add them in the chat. So similar question to you as well as I asked before. Tell me about practical application. So I'm constructing my story, my narrative. Then now, how do I implement it on my website or my ads or?
Yeah. So I see all this as hinging around a simple promise, right? And so we can take, I'm trying to think of a less famous example. So a company I'm working with right now is called Demand Matrix. And what they essentially sell is technographic data, right? But what we're doing is looking to reposition the company around know who to target, when, and why, right? This is a clear, simple promise. And so when you're rolling this out, you create this top level simple promise. It should live at the top of your website. And then you fill in the other, and I actually have some wireframe templates that I can share with the folks on this presentation afterwards, if it's helpful, about where and how to fill in the elements of this story. But you should think about the core promise you're making to the market, right? Drift with conversational marketing. And then you tell that story in a variety of ways again and again and again until you're so sick of hearing it that you can't say it one more time. And just about the time that you can't stand the sound of your own voice is when people will start to remember. And that's, if I were to give one mistake I see companies make, it's they'll spend 3 months coming up with this, they'll do one webinar or something, and then they're like, well, that didn't catch on. And it's like, well, if Drift did conversational marketing once, right, we're not talking about it. But they banged that drum for years. And then now it's like the case study.
Yeah. I'm reminded by, Christopher Lockhead, one of the authors of Play Bigger. In one of the podcast episodes, he said, I've been talking about category creation for 25 years. Finally, it's catching on,
Yeah. I mean, April Dunford, who will be chatting later, right? How many times do you think she's talked about positioning to get us all to start to associate her with that?
Totally.
Yeah. Thousands, I'm sure.
Yeah. Exactly. Question from Harry here. I get the idea of focusing on the expediency of the problem, but in the real world, it takes years for every business to adapt to the new solution. My concern is being overly urgent and not consultative.
Yeah, I think this actually lends itself extremely well to a consultative sale, because what you're doing when you give your little talk, right, to your customers, you're helping them understand how things are changing, right? Why it's an imperative. So if you're doing this well, it should be a joint education. And you do need to drive some urgency in people to make decisions and to do things, right? Because if everything is a nice, let's think about it later, you're still going to be trading paper in a year instead of having customers, right? So
yeah,
I don't know if
awesome.
that answers the question.
And I think that's time. Oh, okay, Uku, one last question. There are lots of time trackers and digital planners. What would be a good narrative in this space? I mean, of course, putting you on the spot here. So,
yeah, I think what would be I think you have to ask yourself a couple questions. One is, what is the real benefit we provide to people, right? You don't sell time tracking, you sell the result of the time tracking. So what is the outcome you're going to help to deliver to people with this? What is the way that you deliver that is different from, that is unique, and that is your longer lasting light bulb? And why is it so important that people start to track time right now, right? You start to answer those three questions, and you'll start to get the shape of a compelling story.
Well, I appreciate you, Brendan. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you later.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, Pep.